Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming today. And our focus being sustainability. We have a wonderful panel. So let me first introduce our panelists. We'll first hear from Christy Everett. She is Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation of Hampton Roads. Next, we're going to hear from Karen Forget, who is Executive Director of Lynnhaven River Now. And then we have Katie Cullipher, who is Principal Environmental Education Planner at Hampton Roads Planning District. And she's also a team lead for AskHRGreen.org. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for panelists for being here. And we will go ahead and start with Christy.
Okay, so great. So as Celeste mentioned, the Hampton Roads Director for Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I'm going to go through some slides. I believe Katie and Karen, I'm not sure if you are using slides, but this might provide you some visuals of some of the efforts that we're working on and what we do and why we're concerned. It starts off very depressing, just as a disclaimer and a warning. You have to get your consent that we start off a little grim about the problems of our waterways. Then we get into some solutions and kind of how we can take action. So if you stick with me, it'll turn around a little bit. It's just a little bit of a warning that Katie and Karen know this work can be a little overwhelming, but we do see a light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to stick with it. Okay, so that said, education, restoration, and advocacy is how I kind of describe what Chesapeake Bay Foundation does. So education, you see on the left, kids getting wet and muddy, having a meaningful experience with nature or, with our outdoors, with our waterways. Many of the students in Hampton Roads, even though we live so close to waterways, we all drive over waterways, or we all have lots of access to waterways visually, but maybe not with an experience, maybe not on the water to understand how pollution affects our waterways. So trying to get them in touch with nature is an important part of our work. The second thing is restoration. So on the top right, you see us putting oysters in the water. I'll talk more about oysters in a minute, but it might be putting a tree or something on the ground that either reduces pollution or improves habitat. And then the third thing, the bottom right, you see us, I think we were delivering letters to Governor McDonnell at the time. So trying to work with advocates to related decision makers that people do care about clean water. In Hampton Roads, we all care about clean water. We might just take the time to let an elected official know. So they're not hearing that to the extent we need them to. So that's more about CBF. This is where we work. So we are at the very bottom end. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think the gallery is in my view, but if you can see my cursor, we are at the bottom end of the Chesapeake Bay. So we are concerned about what's happening 64,000 square miles upstream of us. That might be driving 5 hours west to Virginia Tech. You'll still be in the watershed for most of that ride, or all the way up to Cooperstown, New York, Baseball Hall of Fame. But it's a very shallow body of water considering the amount of area that it drains. So everything that happens, I think there's about 90,000 farms in that area, obviously large urban centers, lots of wastewater coming down. It all affects our local waterways because we're downstream. And to kind of hit that point home, I think visually it helps. This is a Landsat image from space. So you can see how after large storm events, these were 2 storm events in 2011, you see literally sediment running off, but other less visible pollution. So what happens on land affects water. Really important message that sometimes is not intuitive. And this is just kind of helping show, for example, in Hampton Roads, this green area is the Chesapeake Bay watershed, or goes to rivers and streams that lead into the Chesapeake Bay. So really thinking about what we're doing on land and how that's affecting water is a key concept that we probably don't all think about on a daily basis. This is Hampton Roads from space. It might be a little bit of a dated picture, but you can see we have made a dent in Hampton Roads, right? We have been developing for hundreds of years in this area, lots of pavement, lots of impervious surface. So what we're doing on land is pretty much going into the water. We don't have land as that filter. It's more like a funnel sending that pollution off into the water. So this is a kind of a cartoon drawing, but depicts some of those pollution sources that are coming off, particularly through a stormwater system, but just really all those paved surfaces. I wanted to put this slide in here. It's a little technical. It is a Department of Environmental Quality assessment. Essentially, they look at what makes waters impaired based on a scientific standard and monitoring. And you can see that in our area, most of our waterways are impaired due to one standard or another. So it's not just Chesapeake Bay Foundation kind of helping you imagine how pollutants are coming, but there are monitoring standards that are scientifically based and also can elaborate on some of those issues we have. What we see as one of the biggest problems of that pollution is algal blooms. So typically in the summer, when the water gets warm, you have lots of nutrients running off as part of that pollution, and you have algae. It makes the water murky or dark. We tell the kids it looks like pea soup, right? But here you can see it actually blooms as well in a larger bloom that can be toxic to shellfish. Low dissolved oxygen results from when this dies and decomposes. So why it's maybe not as obvious in the naked eye, these pictures were all taken from an airplane. I took actually some of these pictures. It is something that causes major problems for our waterways as well as other parts of our waterways. This picture, again, we're in the depressing part of the talk, stick with me, but this picture shows how we have closures from high bacteria levels throughout Hampton roads due to that runoff that we've been talking about. And then one other aspect that's important to look at is the clarity that would come from clean and clear water with low nutrient loads allows underwater grasses to live. Underwater grasses are critical for habitat. If you're a baby blue crab and a striped bass is coming down the creek, the only place you have to hide is underwater grasses. But it also provides oxygen in the water and then reduces pollution itself, disperses wave energy. So really important habitat that depends on that clean, clear water. And then oysters. Most of us probably like to eat oysters, if not understanding their value. Oysters are also dependent upon clean water. If there is high levels of fecal coliform in our water, determined by the Department of Health, they're closed to shellfish consumption, which of course is really important to understand because that means that reduces our economic value and opportunity and jobs for our region. So what are these kind of nutrients coming from? Three sources: wastewater, agriculture, and stormwater. Those are the main sources in Virginia and throughout the Bay. We can also talk about air, but I wanted to kind of keep it to some controllable sources at this point. This is just a joke that this is not rocket science. We actually know what we need to do to solve this problem. That's the good thing. Lots of problems in our society right now that we don't. But what is it going to take to clean up our waterways? We've basically put the waterways on a diet. It's January. We're all probably talking about eating healthy and New Year's resolutions. So our waterways have been put on a pollution diet. We call it a total maximum daily load, the total maximum amount, a daily load amount of pollutions in order for our water body to not be impaired or still be healthy. And then there's these watershed implementation plans that each state has done to say, this is what we're going to do. Because again, we're downstream. We can't ignore what Maryland and Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. are doing. And then there's been a long time to implement this. So if you hear about the rush to clean up the waterways, just know this is a long and steady planning effort that is intended to clean up our waterways. So what does this mean? In terms of direct deposits, we're trying to get these cows out of streams with fencing. So for example, on the left here, you see cows before that fencing was installed. On the right, you see it with the tree planting. So best management practices on farms like this that help reduce that pollution, particularly coming from upstream and ag areas. The second is stormwater. So reducing that stormwater that's flowing off. This is a big issue, of course, in Hampton roads. We saw that picture of the paved areas. And so looking at our cities that can retain, detain, or infiltrate that water, hold floodwaters in many cases, beautify our cities, but also just hold water in a way that's not harmful and that can help reduce that polluted runoff and help act as habitat as well. And so this is what some of those practices look like. You might not even notice these are doing a good thing. So just thinking about how we think about that differently. So we joke that this is not magic, you know, it's not a miracle occurs, but a lot of this is happening in the General Assembly as we speak. I think session started 10 minutes ago. So our General Assembly is going to help make some of these happen or the opposite. And so really encouraging people to advocate for clean water. Again, our elected officials are not hearing that. We have a Clean Water Captain program. If you want to dig in, you can join our action network. You can go to cbf.org/VA session and learn, and I can put these in the chat, and you can learn about the key issues this year. I know Karen's working on a lot of these issues. And then we have a webinar that was just posted a few weeks ago about our General Assembly sessions if you want to just watch and learn. A lot of things that you can do at home, of course. So pervious pavers, less lawn, native plants, more trees, disconnect downspout, rain barrels. There's things that we can do that really do make a difference. And just to show you that, we've seen our pollution loads drop in half. You can see the trajectories down, meaning less pollution over the last 15 years, 20 years. But we still have a ways to go. There's definitely economic payback for this. I won't get in the details of a report that we did years ago, but I've got that online if you want the details of how this investment is something that does pay back Virginia as well as the Bay. And then, of course, with aquaculture specifically, as I mentioned, aquaculture is critical for jobs of economy. Karen, I know you'll talk about that and the success story that you've worked on with the Lynnhaven with aquaculture. But just understanding too that we can have cycles in our system. And in Virginia, it's important to think about, this is showing the landings of oysters in the turn of the century, how dramatically that's gone down. Those are starting to go back up. What you see in the top right is a man standing right here, if you can see my cursor, 5, 6 stories high in downtown Hampton of oyster shells. So we take out or we impair habitat in many cases, but we can start to see things turn around when we make an investment. So it's really important to kind of understand the difference we can make, but know how far we've come from the ecosystem and the productivity of our waterways. A few of the efforts for oyster restoration is the Spout on Show program. Lynnhaven River Now and CBF are partnering with this barge system right here. This is at Brock Environmental Center. And then we are, I think, Karen, you'll probably speak to this, doing some oyster reefs right now in the Lynnhaven, stocking them with oysters that will grow out in this barge this summer. On the bottom right, you see Elizabeth River Project was building a reef a few years ago that we stocked with these same oysters. So we are putting oysters back in. We're starting to see success. It's just going to take continued investment and interest. And then the last thing I want to mention, I think I'm 1 minute over from 10 minutes, but Brock Environmental Center, that's a whole nother talk about green building and green design. We do give tours, pause because of COVID right now. I'm happy to put a little video in the chat, but that's an example of green building in our community. And it's a center where you can learn about sustainable building in a way that doesn't affect the environment negatively. So more of the walking the walk. So again, quick overview. I talked fast, but hopefully I got the high points on. And again, I'm happy to answer questions, I guess, when we finish the panel, Celeste, if that's the way you like.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Christy. That was wonderful. Karen, if you would like to go ahead with your discussion in your talk about the work of the Lynnhaven River Now.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. I did not plan to use slides. I'm going to talk a little bit first about who we are, who Lynnhaven River Now is, and what the work is that we do. And then Celeste had specifically asked us to talk about sustainability and what that means for our organization. So I'm going to share with you how we define sustainability and how sustainability is reflected in our programs and all of the work that we do. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about a partnership that we have with the city of Virginia Beach right now related to sustainability. So Lynnhaven River Now is, I'm happy to report, celebrating our 20th anniversary in 2022. And our work is in the entire, despite our name, our work is throughout the whole city of Virginia Beach. And as you know, Virginia Beach is a big and very diverse and complicated city. We actually have 7 different watersheds, 3 major watersheds. About 30% of the city's land area drains into the Chesapeake Bay, the northern part of the city, and about 65% of the city's land area drains into the Albemarle-Pamlico estuary in North Carolina. And then about 5% drains directly into the Atlantic Ocean. And all of these different systems have different dynamics and different challenges. And so in working throughout the city, we have to really try to educate people on the various watersheds and how they function differently, and the things that they all have in common, and ways that we can all change our behaviors and make sure that we are really investing in a clean, healthy future for Virginia Beach. So our programs fall into 3 major areas: restoration, Christy talked a little bit about our oyster restoration. We have, from the very beginning of our organization, really had as a primary focus restoring oysters in the Lynnhaven and in Rudy and Owl Creek, the two of the watersheds in the northern part of the city. So oyster restoration has always been important to us, and it has a big payback. The more oysters that are in the water, the more filtering they do, and our waters get clearer. We currently have about 102 acres of sanctuary oyster reef in the Lynnhaven River, and about 50% of the river's area meets the really rigorous water quality standard for shellfish harvest, which is much more rigorous than the swimmable, fishable standards. So to get 50% of the river at a shellfish harvest level is a big accomplishment. When our organization first started in 2002, only 1% of the river met that standard. So that's a big improvement, and is really an accomplishment that it should be shared by everyone in Virginia Beach, because it takes everyone's cooperation and effort to make that kind of progress happen. We also, in the restoration area, work on living shorelines, both on public shoreline areas and with private property owners, in helping them to design and implement living shorelines. We're planting trees. We've planted, I think, 750 trees in the Ocean Lakes neighborhood in the last 2 years, and we're starting some tree planting in the Green Run neighborhood. And we promote native plants and conservation landscaping, ways that people on their own property can reduce their stormwater runoff, whether it's from a residential property or business or faith community. The second big area of our work is advocacy, and Christy talked a little bit about the real importance of good environmental policy. You know, a good example is that we have a very active cleanup volunteer corps. They do cleanups in our Virginia Beach waterways at least once a month throughout the year. Last year, they collected over 6 tons of debris from our waterways and wetlands areas. And when you consider that the most common object, other than cigarette butts, that they find in those environments are plastic beverage bottles, 6 tons is a lot of plastic beverage bottles. So it's important that we're doing this cleanup work, but it also really emphasizes the need for good policy that will help us reduce these pollutants and reduce single-use plastics in the environment. We can't just be picking them up at the end of the pipe. We have to be working to try to keep them out of the environment to begin with. And that's really the core of what advocacy is about. So, you know, we're following a number of issues in the General Assembly right now. The General Assembly opened last week, and it's a marathon. The 6 or 8 weeks that they are meeting in Richmond, they will look at over 2,000 different bills. And some of those a good number of those every year are related to environmental issues. So we're following a number of issues there. And then we also work closely with the city council and our city leaders to try to really help to encourage and support good environmental policy at the city level. And then the biggest area of our programming has always been education and outreach. So we have 4 different education and outreach programs. We work with our Pearl School program. We work with teachers and students. In our Pearl Home and Pearl Neighborhood programs, we work with residents throughout the city. And in our Pearl Business and Pearl Faith Community programs, we work with business owners and the leaders in faith communities throughout Virginia Beach. So when we think about sustainability, I think it's important that we kind of have a shared definition. And for us, it's really a very basic kind of definition that sustainability means meeting our current needs without compromising the future needs. So the residents of the future being able to meet their needs. And that sounds very simple. but it's really not. It really involves rethinking our attitudes, rethinking a lot of our habits, rethinking our behaviors. Are we contributing to a better future for our children and grandchildren, or are our meeting our current needs, is that compromising our children and grandchildren and the kind of world that we're leaving for them? I think that in general, we as humans underestimate our capacity to change. I think we're really much better at changing than we give ourselves credit for. But habits are, people need encouragement, they need reinforcement. And I think from our perspective as an environmental organization, we need to try to help people, help it be easy for people to make those kinds of changes. And sustainability is really at the core of all of our programs and all of the work that we do. For instance, with our residents through our Pearl Home and Pearl neighborhood programs, we are encouraging people to drive less, to reduce their energy consumption in their home. Things as simple as replacing all of your light bulbs with LEDs will have a big impact on your energy consumption. We encourage people to reduce or eliminate single-use plastics, to reduce their overall waste, compost food waste, reduce stormwater runoff. And those are just some examples of the kinds of things that we're trying to educate residents on and really encourage them to make a part of their regular habits and their patterns of behavior. And then with faith communities and businesses, it's similar. We work on some of those same kinds of issues with faith communities and businesses. And we have 2 grant programs for businesses and faith communities. One is that we are able to help them support them financially in getting an energy audit done on their facility. And an energy audit is very, very helpful in really prioritizing what they can do in their facility to reduce their energy consumption. I'll give you a quick example here. Westminster Canterbury is one of our Pearl businesses. And if you're familiar with Westminster Canterbury, it's a really very large facility. They did an energy audit through our Pearl Business Program. And if they implement all of the recommendations in their energy audit, and none of them were huge, none of them were, replacing their HVAC. It was things like LED bulbs, putting sensors on areas of the building that are less frequently used, so the lights automatically go off when no one's in the room, those kinds of things. If the energy audit company estimated that if they implement all of those practices, they could save $90,000 a year in their current energy costs. That's a huge reduction in energy. So we offer the opportunity to our Pearl businesses and Pearl faith communities to do an energy audit. We also have a grant program where we can assist them with landscaping changes on their property. A lot of businesses and certainly a lot of faith communities manage a lot of property, and they don't necessarily have any background in conservation landscaping or really knowing the kinds of things they can do on their property that are going to make a big difference and make their property more sustainable. And then with our schools, when the schools were, in good shape and fully open, and not dealing with COVID, the last year that was true, we worked with over 100 schools in Virginia Beach. So every one of the public schools and a lot of the private schools in Virginia Beach. And we offer teacher training opportunities. We support field activities, outdoor activities for students, and a lot of other environmental education experiences within the schools in Virginia Beach. This year, we're focusing on teacher training opportunities on better understanding the Albemarle-Pamlico watershed, and especially the southern waters in Virginia Beach, the Back Bay and North Landing areas of Virginia Beach that drain into the Albemarle-Pamlico. And, remember, that's 2/3 of our city. And then we're also working with all of the schools in the Green Run area. There are actually 5 elementary schools and 2 middle schools and a high school that all serve students from the Green Run area of Virginia Beach. And we're working with all of those schools on landscaping projects, both on their school grounds and in the common areas in their neighborhoods. So those are 2 areas of focus in the Pearl schools this year. I think that all of the work that we do in restoration is contributing to our sustainability. It's improving the quality of our waterways. It's ensuring that our waterways and our local seafood that we all love is healthy and available for future generations. As all of our programs are really contributing to the sustainability of the city of Virginia Beach. And then lastly, we just entered into a partnership with the city of Virginia Beach to update their sustainability plan. So the city staff developed a sustainability plan with a lot of input from citizens throughout the city, and it was adopted by the city council in 2013. Well, in the 8 years since that plan was adopted, a lot has changed in our city. And one of the big areas of change certainly is flooding. It's our sea level rise and our concern and our knowledge of what lies ahead for our city in flooding, and what kinds of things we need to be doing now to make the city more resilient. So we're in a partnership with the city of Virginia Beach right now, with the city manager's office under the leadership of Councilwoman Henley, to set up a process for involving citizens throughout the city in a new set of kind of focus groups and meetings to inform an updated version of our sustainability plan. This to me is really exciting work, and I think is going to complement the work that the city is just beginning to on their new comprehensive plan. So watch for information about that. And if anybody in this group is really interested in being a part of one of the focus groups, you can let me know and I'll add your name to those lists. The first 4 focus groups are going to meet in, I think the first one is the last week of January and then into February. Of course, we're looking at COVID protocols and, might have to postpone those depending upon the COVID situation that we're all too familiar with at this point. But if anyone would like to participate in that process, let me know. My email is Karen@lrnow.org. And you can find that on our website also. So thanks for this opportunity. And I am happy to answer any questions or, elaborate further on anything that is of interest to someone in the group.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. That was wonderful. We're going to hold off questions till the end. So once we hear from Katie, so our next speaker is Katie Cullipher.
But thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you all today a little bit about the regional program that I help to oversee here at the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. Just a really brief, in case you're not as familiar as some with the HRPDC. We are one of 21 regional planning agencies in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We serve all of Hampton Roads. We have 17 member jurisdictions in our 1.7 million population. And our commissioners, they're actually meeting right now in our regional boardroom, are local and elected officials that meet together regularly to decide on topics of regional importance. And as staff, we're really tasked with doing technical work, research, analysis, data gathering, and executing on those topics that are regionally significant. So our job is really to encourage and facilitate local government cooperation on a lot of these issues that, cross local boundaries and aren't just limited to our local jurisdictions. We do that in the areas of planning, water resources, emergency management, economics, housing. And then my little corner of that is our environmental education program. So about 10 years ago, we launched askhrgreen.org, which is a website, but also like a brand that brings together, our 17 member jurisdictions. We also, HRSD is a member of some of our committees under Ask HR Green. And they're kind of organized into 4 categories. So we have 4 committees of local staff that meet together regularly to talk about one area is stormwater education, so stormwater pollution prevention, some of those topics Karen mentioned earlier about really doing outreach to residents to encourage them to take on good practices with lawn care and not over fertilizing, picking up after their pets, choosing native plants. We also have a litter prevention, recycling and beautification committee, and they focus on waste reduction strategies, litter prevention, litter cleanups, and then just community beautification initiatives. We have a water awareness and conservation group who their task is a little more streamlined, focusing on encouraging all residents to be good stewards of our water supply. And then our FOG, Fats, Oils, and Grease Committee, their focus is more on preventing sanitary sewer overflows that harm our local waterways, and making sure waste is put in its proper place, that people keep fats, oils, and grease out of drains so that our pipes stay clean and we don't have those issues getting into our waterway. So it's a lot of reasons to do this work together. Probably the low-hanging fruit is just our localities are under various permit requirements to do some public outreach into these different topics, and it just really makes sense for them to do it together. Better brand awareness when we work together, consistent messaging. By pooling our local resources, we're able to have better access to doing different types of campaigns and promotions, getting better reach. Obviously, the economies of scale of having all of our local budgets come together for a regional budget, we're able to, buy media that otherwise the localities couldn't do, and just really have better access to the communication tools that we use for this program. So the very heart of the campaign, I mentioned the website earlier. That's really where we try and drive people to for all of our different initiatives. There's a great blog on there. We have an events calendar, and we're not necessarily a group that's always doing these events, but our strength is in sharing information that's happening regionally. Like we'll share information about Lynnhaven River Now's events on our website and Elizabeth River Project, and really just trying to put everything in one place to make it easier for residents to find information that is important to them, as well as some of our own initiatives that we have launched. There's also an online media toolkit where all of our resources are available for our members or for just for the general public to download and use and share. That's really our goal, is just to share this information as much as possible and get it in front of as many people as possible. Right now we have a challenge that we've issued for 2022, asking people to level up and increase their green behaviors. So it's just a fun promotion. We're asking people to take a pledge, tell us what they're going to do to live a little greener in 2022, and be able to have a dialogue ongoing with them over the next few months. In a normal year, which we haven't had in a couple of years, we do a lot of events. We have a trailer, you can see in the top picture here, that we tow out to community events, normally 30 or 40 per year. Just an opportunity to get out and interact with the public, talk to them about some of these topics, see what they're interested in, hand out some promotional materials that are related to these different things, dog waste bag holders or soil test kits or rain gauges, reusable shopping bags. And that's, again, where our localities can pull their resources together to be able to purchase those things, to have that, touch point in the community when we go out and about. We do a lot of social media campaigns, try and work with the media as much as we can on different initiatives, produce a lot of promotion materials that help our localities if they're not having to produce them themselves. We can all work together to share information, and then everyone's kind of singing from the same sheet of music when they go back to their locality and they're handing these things out to their citizens. And then again, we do some paid media themed campaigns throughout the year around a variety of our topics. In terms of student outreach, we have a great environmental education mini grant program where anyone working with youth K through 12 in Hampton Roads can apply for up to $500 for support for their environmentally themed project. Had a little dip in participation last year, obviously with so much virtual learning going on, but the year before we were able to give out over $10,000 in those grants and impacted over 8,000 students across the region. We've also put together some green learning guides over the year that we've been able to distribute to third grade students as well as sixth grade students that focus on these environmental messages, but are directly tied into the Virginia SOLs so that they're very useful in the classroom for teachers. And those are always available online on our website for download anytime. So it's, continues to be a resource. We have a couple of community grant programs, and one is a pet waste station grant program where community associations, neighborhoods can apply for a pet waste station for free that they can put and install in their neighborhood as long as they, pledge to maintain it, keep it clean, and service properly. And that's been a really popular program over the years. So that's an ongoing initiative. And then last year, we also launched a cigarette waste receptacle initiative where, local businesses can apply for a cigarette waste receptacle to put at those transition points where a lot of the cigarette litter happens. Again, it's, it saves businesses about $100 or $150 or so, and really helps to, put a useful tool in place where a lot of litter can add up. And I know Karen mentioned earlier, that's certainly a #1 littered item everywhere. I was going to go through just a few of our programs over the years and highlights, and I thought I would take a chance and instead of talking about it, because I have trouble losing my voice right now, we have a short little 2-minute video because this is our 10th anniversary of the Ask HR Green program. We put together a little highlight video that just kind of goes through some of these initiatives, shows you some of the outcomes and results we've had over the year, and I thought I would end on that instead of talking you through some more slides. So I'm going to take a chance, try and share this video, and hope that it goes through smoothly.
Hampton Roads is surrounded by a lot of blue, but we have come together to keep us green. AskHRgreen.org. For 10 years, this initiative has been a strong and reliable environmental resource. We've worked to help beautify our communities and improve and protect our waterways, infrastructure, and recycling activities through programs, tools, information, and inspiration. Wow, it's amazing what we can do when we work together. We love this place. We love where we live and work. AskHRGreen.org, 10 years together. Here's to a cleaner, greener Hampton Road.
Well, that got a little glitchy for me, but hopefully you got most of it across. I'll never learn my lesson. I always trust technology more than I should. Anyway, so like I said, we've been doing this work for more than 10 years, but brought those 4 separate committees all under one roof 10 years ago. It just made sense to bring people to one regional hub for environmental education information. And again, we don't always reinvent the wheel, but we're trying to share what our localities are doing. You know, when it makes sense to work together on these things, you know, that's kind of where our strong suit is. And we certainly rely on partners like our, you know, Lynnhaven River Now and Elizabeth River Project and CVF for their expertise in their areas, and try and do as much information sharing. You know, we even have members sit in from those groups on some of our various education committees to help guide our efforts as we move forward. You know, and looking forward to some new initiatives coming up. I will just put a plug in for Regional Great American Cleanup. It's a 2-day event, March 25th and 26th. And again, these are opportunities to get volunteers out to do cleanups. Localities do these already. We market it all under Great American Cleanup for Hampton Roads to get as much participation as possible, and have as much impact as we can. And, you know, we really see huge numbers when we have all those events lined up together on one weekend. Like Karen mentioned, you know, tons of litter collected. And so anyway, if you're interested in getting involved in that, go to askhrgreen.org/cleanup. We'd love to have you volunteer with us this March. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. And I'm glad the video worked. So that was good. So I'm going to open it up to the group. We have 15 minutes. If you want to you can let me know if you have a question, or you can go ahead and ask the panel, or you can type something in the chat area, and then I can ask the panelists those questions. So feel free to, don't be shy. We have these wonderful experts here, and with their knowledge, if there's nobody going to planning to ask questions, I have some questions. So, okay, let's see here. Something popped up in the chat. Okay, so, all right. So Karen did put her email address if you're interested in being on the sustainability focus groups for Virginia Beach. Christy did put some information there about the priorities. I'm going to just go ahead and start off with asking Christy. Christy, you mentioned about the clean water captains. Can you expand a little bit more what that is and how people can get involved with that?
Sure. And we have a lot of volunteer opportunities. Katie and Karen mentioned there's lots of opportunities for people to get involved and help, and of all ages and kind of all time frames, depends the time of year. So the Clean Water Captains is more of the advocacy kind of work. So it is a group that comes together each month and shares information on what they're doing across Virginia in their respective localities to either track local, state, or federal decision making and how they can help. And so Clean Water Captain might write a letter to their elected official and say, you know, please support clean water, or please pass this bill, or please don't pass this bill, or maybe write a letter to the editor. Some people aren't as interested in advocacy, and so there are volunteer opportunities for those kind of folks too. So like Katie mentioned with the Great American Cleanup, and Karen mentioned with their ongoing cleanups, we have a cleanup to Clean the Bay Day this year. It's May 29th through June 4th. It's a do it yourself, or you can do it at a group on that last Saturday, or that first Saturday in June. And then people can do oyster gardening. There's several other volunteer opportunities if people aren't as interested in the Clean Water Captain, but that is a great way for people to learn about how they can advocate and learn about other advocacy programs throughout the state. So as you mentioned, my information's in the chat as well. So just let me know if you're interested, and I can send you more information on that.
Great. Okay, great.
Tiara has her hand up.
Okay. Okay, yes, Tiara, go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for those great presentations. I actually had a question about whether there are like grant programs or programs that are aimed at increasing access to recycling. The question came to my mind because I'm from Southern California and I've been kind of trained to recycle since I was a little child. Like we started separating our recyclables from trash at a very young age and that kind of continued. But moving out to Virginia, I found that it's very difficult to find a place where I'm supposed to take my recyclables. And even in California, the apartment complexes provide like a trash bin that has like one side for trash, one side for recyclables. So are there programs that will encourage places like my apartment who likes to do the bare minimum to increase recycling efforts and things like that?
Okay, Karen, it looks like you want to answer. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, I can speak to that, and then others may want to jump in too. So our recycling programs throughout the United States were very dependent upon selling these materials to companies mostly in China and some in India that did the actual recycling of the materials. China completely cut that off several years back, 5 years or so. And that has really hampered recycling programs across the country. If they can't, if the haulers, the ones who are picking up the recycling products, the way they make their money to support the collection process is by selling the materials that they collect for their recyclable value. When they have no markets where they can sell those materials, whether it's cardboard or paper or plastics or glass, then their whole business plan kind of collapses. And that's really what's happened to recycling across the country. Some local cities have really looked carefully at what it's costing them and, the cost benefit analysis of that and are, debating whether they should even continue to offer curbside recycling. So I think that there are a couple of keys to this. And one is we need more companies in the United States that are actually able to process the materials and do the recycling work. So turning them into other products. And then the other part of that is reducing the consumption of these materials. There are 3 different versions of this bill right now in the state legislature. It's called extended producer responsibility, which is kind of a wonky term that doesn't probably mean a whole lot to people. But the bills that the state legislature are going to be looking at are actually requiring the manufacturers of products to have a recycling plan for their products and especially their packaging. A focus of it is reducing packaging. So we've all seen, you buy one item, that's this big, and you have a pile this large of cardboard and plastic and other packaging materials when you actually get that product home. So the focus there is to really reduce the packaging and require the manufacturers to take responsibility for it. So it's not the municipalities that are left with that responsibility. And then the other part of that is just reducing consumption. And that's one of the things that we really push in all of our programs, our residential programs, as well as businesses and faith communities and through our schools, is, think about what you're buying. Don't buy beverages in single-use plastic bottles because they really can't be recycled. And, look at carry your own water bottle so you're not buying single-use water, and all of the ways that we can reduce our consumption of those products. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you, Karen. Did Christy or Katie, did you want to add anything? Oh.
Well, I just wanted to mention, recycling, it's an interesting conversation here, and Karen's absolutely right. In the last couple of years, unfortunately, when some of our localities have been renewing their contracts, we're at the worst possible time for recycling markets. And so they're taking a hard look at them. You've seen the recent news with Chesapeake. There's been a couple of smaller localities that have canceled their programs in the last couple of years, because they're having to pay top dollar for these services. And, part of it also comes down to a consumer responsibility and how we recycle. That's what a lot of our education efforts have been revolved around. We launched a new Start Smart Recycle Right program just last year. And the first part of that, like Karen mentioned, was reducing your consumption. The second part is then thinking about packaging when you're at a store and making choices that are in line with what recycling options that you have. When you're in an apartment complex or multifamily, oftentimes you don't have the luxury of that curbside recycling service like some single family homes might have, and the apartments aren't as apt to pay for that service. So there are convenience centers for those that still want to, do recycling depending on where you live. We have a list of resources on our website by locality. So I'd encourage you I'll put that in the chat, like how you get to that page specifically so you can look up where you live and what recycling and disposal options might be there for you. But I think it's an ongoing conversation. It's one like our chief administrative officers are engaged in at the regional level to figure out how can we do this more collaboratively across the region, make it most sense so that these programs are, they're important, but they have to be efficient too. So I think things are going to continue to unfold here in Hampton Roads when it comes to recycling.
Great. That's a great question, Tahara. And thank you both for answering that. I did see in the news there are more companies, Tahara, Southern California, that are developing products with those plastics. And thank you, Katie, for putting that information up for people who do live in apartments who do not have recycling at their where they live, at their dwelling. We do have some questions here. Somebody commented saying all insightful presentations. The question is, are there any efforts to collaborate with or extend these efforts across developing countries? This question is for any of the experts. So looking at taking these initiatives and working with developing countries. Anybody?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say, we have a pretty, singular focus on regional efforts in Hampton Roads. Our funding comes from our local governments and to meet their specific needs. But, a big effort that we've always felt was important was to put all of these resources and materials on our website as, a toolkit that others can use and share. And we are always open to that. We haven't had as much international interest, but nationally, some of the programs we've done recently are cigarette litter waste prevention, where we created these giant model scale cigarette butts and got a huge response from the community and from the media, just in an awareness effort of the amount of cigarette litter that's in our communities. We've had lots of different cities contact us to replicate that. And we put a how-to video together so that we can easily share information about how we do these things. So we're always open to sharing resources, but in terms of our work directly, it's pretty focused on Hampton Roads for us.
Okay, great. We do have one more question. We have about 4 more minutes. The question relates to the roles played by churches and communities of faith. How can they become more directly involved and educate their members on the importance of sustainable environmental practices? I know, Karen, you talked about the Pearl Faith communities. Maybe do you want to answer that? And if anybody else.
I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more on our pro-faith program. Our services are limited to the city of Virginia Beach for the most part. We have worked with a couple of faith communities that are located in Norfolk because they draw their congregation from really the whole region, but mostly in the city of Virginia Beach. And I'm not sure where, I think your audience members probably live throughout Hampton Roads. But through our Pearl Faith program, we offer education opportunities for the congregation. We can do all sorts of different programs for, individual classes or committees within that faith community or for the whole faith community congregation. And, as I mentioned earlier, we help them with landscaping, conservation landscaping, installing rain barrels, building rain gardens, removing impervious surfaces, getting rid of turf grass and converting that into planted beds, planting trees, diverting downspouts. I mean, there are all kinds of things that they can do on their buildings to manage their grounds more effectively. And the zoning requirement for faith communities in Virginia Beach, unless they are grandfathered in, is 3 acres. So, a lot of these faith communities, cumulatively, they're managing a lot of property. So we try to help them both directly with some financial assistance to accomplish their goals, but also with some education and connections to companies that can help them do the work and other sorts of things. We have one faith community that has a lot of shoreline area, and we've worked with them on how to better manage their shoreline. And then we also, address what happens inside the building with energy audits to help them reduce their energy consumption. Again, faith communities generally have very large buildings that are very underutilized during the week. So if there are ways that they can, reduce, one of the ways they can reduce their energy consumption is to really, look at how they can do space heating and air conditioning rather than air conditioning and heating an entire building when they're not using it, and lighting, and then just simple things like don't use styrofoam cups for your coffee hour, and the other kinds of ways that they can implement new practices to be more responsible and more sustainable. And our experience is that faith communities can be kind of slow in getting started because there are so many different people and committees involved often in decision making. But once they commit themselves, once they are really ready to move forward, there aren't any communities that are more dedicated or more focused on really meeting their goals and accomplishing something and being responsible members of the community.
Great, thank you so much. I know it's 1 o'clock, so if people want to head off, would the panel be willing to take one more question? I know we're at our time limit.
Sure.
What do you
I'll
think?
just add too to the churches.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, Christy, go ahead.
Karen, you all do so much with faith communities, but Elizabeth River Project's also an option too for those in the Elizabeth River watershed. They work with rural businesses and churches, including Chesapeake Bay Foundation does as well, particularly with tree plantings or rain gardens. So just know, for those of you who are outside of Virginia Beach, Karen, to your point of there are resources for others too.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
just chime in, just say that
Yes.
we've had some success with our mini grant program. It's not just open for teachers, but anyone working with youth K through 12. So we've had youth group leaders apply for grants to start recycling programs at their church or to do other initiatives. So there's an opportunity there to get some good seed money to do a project through our mini grant program. And we'd love to see more of that from our faith communities.
Okay, great. And would those mini grants also be for schools if they wanted to do that or no?
Yeah, schools, Boy Scout, Girl Scout groups, local youth groups, anyone working with youth
Great.
K through 12 can apply.
Okay, that's wonderful. Does anybody else have any? I had one last question regarding the sustainability work that Lynnhaven River Now is doing. And just to see how you mentioned, Karen, that you work with helping the city of Virginia Beach shape policy. Like, could you give any specific examples of how you have shaped policy? And do you think they should reinstate their Office of Sustainability within the city of Virginia Beach?
Well, I think the best example is the work that we're doing currently on the updating of the sustainability plan, because the whole, one of the real areas of focus in this updating work is to get as many different people and organizations in the community involved as possible. And we really want this to not be a plan that sits on the shelf, but one that prioritizes implementation and ways that faith communities and civic leagues and schools and other groups in the community can really tie into this plan and see ways that the things that they're doing are helping the city move toward these goals, so that it's a community plan, not a city staff plan. It's really one that involves the whole community. And then the second, what was the other part of your question?
They developed the sustainability plan, but then they
Oh, this
disbanded the
one.
Office of Sustainability.
Yeah. There's been a lot of change in the way the city staff is organized over the last few years in Virginia Beach. The new city manager has been in place for, I think, a couple of years now, a little less than a couple of years. And he's had to deal with a lot of retirements and all of that was kind of predictable. But I'm encouraged by the new people that he's bringing in and the ways that he is starting to really shape the way the city is structured. And I think that flooding and dealing with sea level rise is, a growing priority for city staff. And it'll be interesting to me to see how they kind of organize around that effort. It's been pretty much owned by Public Works up till now. They're the ones who work directly with the Dewberry Group to do all the studies and the plans. But I think going forward, we're going to see some changes in how the city staff is organized. And one of those may be an Office of Sustainability.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And I just want to say, I really appreciate you all taking the time, Christy and Katie and Karen, for being here and sharing your important work. It's making such a difference in this area. And thank you for sharing the links and the websites and just all the programs you're doing. So for the audience, if they want to get involved in any way, that they have those resources to reach out to you all. So if we don't have any, go ahead, Karen.
I'll say one quick thing. Also, I think Robin Dunbar from the Elizabeth River Project is on the call.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if she wanted to say anything before we close.
No, I just wanted to let you know that we do partner quite a bit with Karen's group, Lynnhaven River Now, and Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We collaborate all together, and we're working on a lot of policies and watershed action plans and resilient plans. And then, of course, with the university and the big groups. So there's power in numbers, and we all love working together on what we can do to help the Bay.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. And we could hear that. So wonderful. And I just think one of the great things hearing today was the collaboration of these organizations, that they are working together in partnership. And if anybody wants to get involved, you have these great resources, and we can go from there. Just keep the conversation going, that we are facing a lot of challenges here in our area with sea level rise and climate change, but there are good things happening. So that is very encouraging. I know the challenges are real, but we have good people, and I think good things are happening. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists, for being here and sharing your knowledge. And I don't have anything else. Did you want to say anything in closing?
No, just to close and thank you for everyone who's for the presenters and for all of our Hampton Roads chapter members for joining us today. Thank you.